We look so tired as well. So
It's
I'm
not great.
hoping I'm hoping most people are just audio only. But anyway, I have a question for you.
Oh God,
Okay.
yeah.
What do you call a small mother?
I don't know.
A mini mum. A mini mum.
Oh, a minute.
Minimum?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Okay. I get
Minimum.
that. Yeah. Nice. That's pretty good.
Oh god, I think I said it too correctly.
Alrighty. Well, welcome to this week's episode of the 107 podcast, where we are back after Italy, essentially.
Monza, yes, we are back.
First time we visited Italy this year. Oops.
Well, the weather is completely different.
Yes, weather was completely different. Looked gorgeous. Looked like the Tifosi had a great day out, essentially, or a couple of days, I guess, with the pole as well. So, yeah, not a bad race at all.
No, not a bad race at all. For the Tifosi, I think they're happy with pole and a podium, or a third and a fourth, actually, considering they're up against the Red Bulls. But yeah, it was, business as usual for MaX, who, I don't care what people say about Adrian Newey or the car or who he's up against. 10 wins in a row is just epic.
Yeah, and it's absolutely insane.
You just gotta hold your hands up and say we're witnessing something special, and take it in, appreciate it, because it could be a very, very long time since we see it again. When was Seb's 2013? 10 years, 10-year gap. So fair play to him. Wasn't on pole, just took his time. There was a very 2021-esque incident that could have happened between him and Sainz.
True.
I think. But I think he was like I've got this in the bag. I can just do it where it's safe.
He knew he didn't have to battle as hard with Lewis. Like him and Lewis were obviously 2021. They were so closely matched. It was insane. Whereas Verstappen knew that, I'll take him in the next corner anyway. So,
So, yeah, he was just biding his time. I think, he has a couple of, he's pushing me, but yeah, it was business as usual for MaX. And, I actually have no words on how epic that was. I mean, whether you hate MaX or whether you love him, hate Red Bull or love them, you've just got to, it's not just a Formula One thing in sports to do that. It's just
10 is absolutely ridiculous because it's so different to like a Premier League team. If they go 10 games unbeaten, that's pretty good, but it's not like unheard of.
No, and
but this is completely different.
And if you're in a sport like the Premier League or the NFL, the NBA, we've gone a point down, a goal down, touchdown for the other team, we can still come back. If he gets an engine failure, he's done.
Yeah.
If he gets caught in a crash, he's done.
Yeah.
That record's reset.
I mean, think about it for example, like Manchester City, they have they don't just have 11 good players and then if one of them gets injured, they can't finish the game. They have substitutions and they can make changes and stuff like that within that one game. Can't really do that so much within a Formula One race. You just can't. If you make a mistake, if you get damage to the car, that's it. You're done. So it's not only a testament to the design of the car and how fast that car is, but it's also a testament to how well MaX has managed to keep that thing on the road and unscathed, essentially, as well as reliable as well. Because I'm sure that he's probably managing different bits and pieces from within the cockpit and stuff like that. So, but this is pure and utter domination. And
his engine was failing towards the end of Monza.
Yes,
and he was losing up to 2 seconds a lap.
Yeah, he was starting to slow down a little bit towards the end. Unfortunately, not quite enough for anyone to catch him, but there we go. Or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it. But I think that you're right. We haven't seen this level of domination, first of all, ever in terms of 10 wins in a row. But 9 wins the last time was Seb, and then the 9 wins before that was what? Fangio, sorry, in what? 51?
Something like
that. So it's like a 70-year difference.
He's not been on pole for some of those races. So like you said, he's had to come through and overtake.
Yeah.
And he's got his teammate in the same car who he's overtaken in a couple of these races.
Yeah, I think the other scary thing as well is that like I think you could include 1 or 2 sprint race results in there as well.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So there's that as well.
Oh, and by the way, because we've talked about this a couple of times between ourselves and Terry, the earliest he can win the championship is Qatar.
That is the earliest, yeah.
I've predicted Qatar, so that would mean he'll have to continue his winning streak.
So he couldn't win it in the US?
The US is...
After. That's the race after.
Yeah, so the earliest he can win it is Qatar. So Singapore, he can't do it.
No.
And who else? What's else is before Singapore?
It's Singapore's next.
Japan,
then
you can't do
Japan, then Qatar, then
sorry. He can do it in Singapore and Japan. I think he can do it in Japan depending on where Sergio comes.
Yeah.
I've made the assumption that Sergio is P2 in both races.
Yeah, P2 or P3 type thing.
Yeah.
That's what I would assume. But I mean, you never know. But
well,
also,
somebody else did the maths.
You never know in Singapore as well. Hopefully we get some good stuff. But should we get back slightly and talk about the race in and of itself? But first of all, because there's not really that much to talk about in terms of qualifying for Monza, but there's obviously the pole position, which was like 0.06 or something like that. Like time difference in quali, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Carlos was 120.294 and Max was 120.307.
Yeah, so it was like a really, really tight margin as well. So hats off to Carlos for putting that lap out of the bag, because I think that there was a little bit of Ferrari magic involved there. And also very classy of, I can't remember if it was him or oh my god, the guy from Monaco whose name has just completely fallen out of my head.
Charles
Leclerc, Jesus Christ. Or Charles, I can't remember either one of the Ferrari drivers, but they were shushing the crowd or like telling the crowd not to boo Verstappen
I think that was Charles.
Yeah, I think so.
When they were booing Max
but it's just a little bit of sportsmanship, which I really appreciate. And I don't think it goes unnoticed, especially not between the other drivers within the paddock as well, I'm assuming.
It's not nice. He's he's not done anything wrong.
No, not at all.
What has he done wrong? Just try and put his car on pole and win races.
Which he didn't even do. He didn't put his car on pole in that situation. But yeah, so the pole lap was absolutely brilliant, amazing. And I feel like if you're Ferrari going into this race and somebody says to you, you don't win the race, but you take pole, and nothing terrible happens, but you get pole, like nothing terrible happens in the race. Most of the Tifosi probably would have taken that. So I think it was great for them, something to celebrate. We also had a man on the ground, kind of, in terms of one of our followers was there watching the race.
He looked like he had a great time.
Absolutely.
The paddock and everything.
Amazing. Yeah, met Will Buxton, which is awesome. If you know who you are, but yeah, so we had a man on the ground as well, and he said that it was absolutely amazing. Like the atmosphere was brilliant. Flew in all the way from the US as well. I did send him some stickers as promised, but I don't think they arrived in time, which is a little bit of a shame. So whoever on earth is staying at that Airbnb of his now has some random stickers, I guess. But yeah, so like he was saying that the atmosphere all weekend was absolutely brilliant. And that obviously carried into Sunday, and the race itself was brilliant. We saw some proper racing.
It was good up until Max took the lead.
Yes, but it was still interesting to watch the two Ferraris fight it out behind.
Oh yeah, towards the end, between Charles and Carlos.
Yeah, the beginning was pretty good. The start was very interesting, and I'm really, really disappointed that Yuki didn't make the start. Like, really disappointed. I don't think that the AlphaTauri was particularly quick, obviously, and I don't really think that he would have scored points realistically. But at the same time, it was still really disappointing to see him retire. And then obviously
we'll talk about it a little bit when we talk about AlphaTauri. But considering they've still got both spaces available for next season, like any race he can to show that I'm still the guy. I know you've got Liam Lawson, Daniel Ricciardo, maybe anyone else coming up. You know, it's one less race for him to show. Yeah, he's got.
It's just a real shame that he couldn't take part. You know. Because I love Yuki. I think he's definitely got what it takes, for sure. Yeah. He just needs a little bit of a better car, maybe with like a particular strength, like, you know, under braking or whatever it is, or maybe like high-speed corners or whatever it is compared to the AlphaTauri at the moment. not being particularly strong in any space, unfortunately. Anyway, so rest of the race, Jesus. Oscar Piastri led a couple of laps, which is, I'll be honest, like cool, but also like, yeah, I think it's just you just didn't pit. It wasn't on merit, which is a little bit of a shame. It was just purely because McLaren left the boys out a little bit longer than expected. But I mean, it was interesting. Led your first laps, you've got them out of the way, so hopefully that will prepare him a bit better for the future. And yes, of course, I have to talk about McLaren first, but it was one of the more notable bits and pieces that happened during the weekend. Like I said, the battle between Ferrari was really, really good as well. But there was another driver who retired, and I will give you £10 if you can tell me another driver who retired who nobody knew retired.
Did he retire? Or was he just given a 10-second time penalty?
I don't know what happened. Honestly, give him a penalty for retiring, because Ocon just completely dropped off the face of the earth. I didn't know that he'd retired, but apparently he did.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you when did he retire, because I genuinely
no one
don't
said
know.
anything on the broadcast. I just saw it on the news afterwards.
Yeah, there was nothing on the F1 TV either. Literally nothing. It didn't say retired at the bottom of the screen or anything like that. I don't know what lap he retired. I'm just trying to look.
Lap 39.
Lap 39. So there was like 11, 12 laps between him retiring and
how forgettable the Alpine's performance was. Apparently it is.
Yeah, it's not great. But speaking of forgettable performances, do you want to talk about the Aston Martins?
Well, I don't mind talking about Fernando.
Yeah, well, of course. But I think that just the difference in the results between Alonso up in P9, which is very respectable, because we know that car, the Mercedes as well, arguably, and also that the McLaren, they weren't going to perform at this track, realistically. No. This is not really the track for them. This is more a track for Red Bull, Ferrari, and you could potentially even argue Alfa Romeo as well.
I'd say Williams.
And Williams for sure, yeah. But so it just didn't really suit their car's strength. So for Alonso to get P9 is pretty good. However, Lance Stroll trundling around, just essentially keeping the Hasses at bay, who didn't have a particularly good weekend either, which is a real shame. But for Stroll to just be essentially a backmarker again, it just brings up the question again, like, when on earth is somebody going to have to sit down with Papa Stroll and be like, mate, what is going on? Because it just keeps happening.
Yeah, look, we don't know. We can just be armchair psychologists, but he just wasn't on it this weekend. He's just, you can tell.
Yeah, in his post-race interview, he looked so done with everything. He just looked like he wanted to go home.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe he was just having one of those weekends. I mean, he had to play to kind of back Lance a little bit. He had no running pretty much the whole weekend, right? He just could, like, he had the engine issue. So, but I was watching an interview with Fernando, and he's like, look, we probably, not saying he could have got, Lando or Alex, but he's like, we were actually quicker, but when it just came to the straights, we just couldn't get close enough to make a move. So, I mean, if he's saying that, then you're expecting him to at least, by him I mean Lance, you're expecting him to at least get past a couple of cars. Like, he had Gasly in front of him, and Zhu and Logan. Maybe it could have been difficult because he's in the Williams.
Yeah.
But at least you're expecting him to try. But he was just a weekend to forget for him and Aston Martin. And I don't think he's going anywhere. Maybe a 2-week break is what he's needed, and
maybe let's hope so.
We'll see what happens at Singapore, because I'm really annoyed that they've changed the track to take out those couple of corners and make it a straight.
Yeah, we'll talk about Singapore next week, but that was one of the big things that came out recently.
I think that will hinder Aston Martin very slightly.
Slightly, yeah. But maybe that 2-week break, and knowing that Singapore is a track that Aston Martin can really do well at, will actually give Stroll a bit more motivation. Like, could we potentially see Stroll on the podium potentially? Who knows? Like,
you never
because
know.
He's pulled it out the bag before, and so maybe he knows this season has been building up to this very technical track, or like not this one in particular, but a few very technical tracks like Singapore. So potentially, maybe he pulls it out the bag. But I'll be honest with you, based on the rest of his season, I don't think that's going to happen, I'm afraid.
No, it's not. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think they can get away with it now because the car is not supposed to be where it's supposed to be. In a way, they made a huge jump, but they're not challenging for poles and wins. So it's like, we're okay, right? We've got a lot of stuff coming with the factory and the wind tunnel. But if that was a Red Bull, Ferrari, where they're challenging for poles and with Red Bull wins, they're like, look, it can't be like Ferrari 2010, 2012 again, where it's just Fernando carrying the team. So yeah, do we want to talk about a Ferrari just a little bit more? And like you said, they had the battle at the end with Charles and Carlos, and there seems to be a little bit of a consensus where Charles is the number one person.
Yeah,
we've heard it from Terry that Ferrari should just have a number one driver and be behind him.
Yeah,
and it seems Charles was the guy. He was the quicker guy overall. But Carlos is like, well, actually, you know what? Now that people are saying that, I've put it on pole a few times. I've held off my supposedly faster teammate.
Yeah.
Could he be the person where, like, actually, you know what? Consistency wins? Because for as great as Charles is, and, I love Charles, there are times where, he would just bid it.
Yeah, so I think that the Charles and the Carlos situation really does depend on contracts, because I feel like if Ferrari could, they would sign Charles on another ridiculously long contract, like 4 years, right? But they want to stay in the driver market for 2026, which is understandable.
And I'm sure Charles wants options as well.
Charles will probably want options as well. Carlos seemingly wants some sort of option as well, especially with rumours of him coming in and being part of the Audi setup as well. So I don't really know, but I feel like if Charles were to say, you know what, I'll take a 4-year deal or like a really long-term deal and I'll be here until 2027, let's say, then I feel like they could potentially transition into that first driver role, and Carlos or whoever would be backup or second driver, and it would be very, very clear. But I don't think it would go as well as if you flip the script and Carlos was the one who was there as the main driver and Charles was, the second driver. But I don't think that Ferrari would ever do that. I think it's too much of a slap in the face to Charles, and they have too much respect for Charles, I think, personally. However, if I was to choose between the two of them, I would pick Carlos as my first driver, purely because I think that he is the sort of person during the race, and you can hear it, and we've mentioned this before in previous weeks, he is the one to take the team by the scruff of the neck and say, come on, let's have some common sense, do this is what should happen type thing. I just feel like he would be the difference on multiple occasions going forward, whereas Charles is very reliant on the team, but the team isn't there. So I think that unless Ferrari all of a sudden next year come out and all of their team issues are sorted, like, having tyres to do a pit stop, which would be great, then I think, sure, yeah, okay, then it makes sense to have Charles as the first driver. But that's just not the case right now. It just isn't. Ferrari is still a mess, and it still needs someone like Carlos to, give them a bit more direction. What do you think?
I think that, again, they're similar in Aston Martin in a way, where I think if this was the start of 2022, that car, they would have had to pick a number one.
Yeah.
Because it's like, look, the Red Bull just way too far ahead.
Yeah.
We're just maximizing points, just get third and fourth, the odd pole if you can.
Yeah.
Then we can let it go. Well, at Ferrari, the team is first. But it will get, I don't know, it depends on if Ferrari get there or not, because was it been since 2007 since they won the championship?
Yeah, 2007, Kimi Raikkonen.
And to be fair, that's because McLaren also just kind of fucked everything up.
Fumbled the bag completely. Yeah.
Shit just went down in 2007 with them.
Well, there are a lot of conspiracy theories about that.
We can talk about it. We can talk about the summer break.
That's something for the winter break.
Yeah. But yeah, I think right now it's like, we don't need a number one, so there's no point having that hassle. But it could get to a point. I think they'll back Charles. But I think when that happens, when the car is the dominant car or is winning races, I don't think Charles is going to be at that team.
I'm not too sure. We'll have to wait and see.
I think it'll be somewhere else.
Yeah, I feel like for me, Charles will eventually grow tired of Ferrari, and although it's a dream to have done it, it is a very much a case of been there, done that. And I think that if, for example, Red Bull or Mercedes come in, especially Red Bull right now, and knowing the history of Mercedes as well, he may be swayed or tempted, especially as he grows into the later years of his career. Like, I can't remember how old he is now. 26? 26?
He's still quite young.
But my point being is that
25.
He's 25. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually 26 next month. So
okay. So, but all right. So call him 26 for argument's sake, right? So his contract is for the next 2 years, right? So he's until 2025. Or is it 2024?
I think it's 2024.
Okay, 2024. So you're 27. You've just finished up your contract, right? You know that realistically, between 28 and 30, those are probably going to be your prime years to try and win a championship, right? Yep. So you could sign an extra year or two with Ferrari, but if it doesn't look like you're going to win a championship, but all of a sudden, Helmut Marko knocks on your door and says, "Charles, my friend, what do you think about a seat here?" He could be tempted. Especially if Red Bull is still dominating by that point, which, let's be honest, they could be. So I think that it depends on who comes in the door for him and what happens in the rest of the driver market. But I do feel as though, because a lot of drivers' contracts are up at the end of next year, we will see a lot of switches.
So, sorry, you're right. He's actually contracted till 2025.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was. I just couldn't remember. But let's say 2026 season, he is a free man. So, and this is what I'm saying.
Maybe he takes that year to have a look. Like, let's not jump ship. Let's see what cars are top of the game.
Yeah,
it could be anyone.
Yeah, it could be.
And then 2026 is like Ferrari is still not there.
Maybe he gives it a go. He's won races with Ferrari, but I think that if he sees that they're not going to be a championship contender like they were last year, where they sort of held on somehow through luck to be in the position where they were up until about halfway through the season, and then Max ran away with it. Up until France, I think France was where we knew that he'd
and the engine turned down as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like up until those points, I think he probably believed it still that if he did everything right, he could probably challenge. And so I think that unless there's a situation like that again where he can properly challenge, I just don't see it going particularly well staying within that team. But we'll have to wait and see. I don't know. I could be completely wrong.
Look, he's said it multiple times. His dream is to win the Formula One World Championship, and if he can't get at Ferrari, he'll look elsewhere.
Yeah, I think as well. There would be no shame in him going to a different team and winning a drivers' championship or trying.
Yeah,
I don't see any shame in it whatsoever.
Fernando tried, and he left. Seb tried, and he left. So, yeah. We'll see what happens.
Maybe Fred does a bang-up job. Who knows?
Yeah, or maybe the team design a car that can challenge a Red Bull. But we shall see.
We shall.
Mercedes, 5th and 6th, George and Lewis.
Just a solid race from them, to be honest with you. Minus Hamilton trying to murder Oscar Piastri. That was no, I'm kidding. I wouldn't say it's a racing incident, but come on, old man.
He misjudged it. That's it.
Come on, old man.
He said it was his fault.
We, the two of us, Ash and Jacob, we had a little bit of a discussion about this, didn't we? About how the penalty probably should have been 10 seconds, in my opinion.
No, I think 5 seconds is fair.
You think 5 seconds is fair. But I think that because Oscar dropped out of the points because of that contact and because of the incident, I even suggested to you, and this may be completely stupid, let's be honest, everyone is going to be fucking stupid, but it may be stupid of me to even suggest that if the person that you make contact with has to go through the pits to repair damage like front wing or something like that, If they like bald spot their tires and then have to pit, it is what it is. But if they cause body damage, then any penalty that is given to the opposing driver, the driver who is found at fault, has to do a drive-through penalty to serve that penalty. Because you're forcing both drivers, you're neutralizing both. That's what I mean. But is that too harsh? Is that not harsh enough? Like, what do we think?
The issue with that is we've seen like some like minor wing damage and cars continue.
Yeah.
And I can see a team that we're like, look, we'll just come in, change the wing, and force that other driver to.
Yeah, it could get quite tactical because let's say, for example, that you had, let's say, for example, Hamilton had made contact with Piastri and they were 4th and 5th, and Lando was on for a podium, but Mercedes had pitted before and they were on much quicker tyres, and Hamilton was due to catch Lando for that last podium spot. With that rule in place, McLaren, all they have to do is say, oh, we're going to pit because there's damage, and then all of a sudden it drags Hamilton out of that podium spot, potential podium spot. So there is that argument for it, but at the same time, if the old man maybe updates his contacts and, you know, sees the McLaren at the edge of the road. No, he did misjudge it. I'm just taking the piss. But I think that if you know, if on any other day, it could have not been contact, or it could have been teeny tiny bit of damage. It could have been whatever. And I think it's just very unlucky. But it does beg the question, like, because it is such a big disadvantage if you have to pit.
Yeah.
Should the penalty be harsher? I was reading it on Twitter, and I did see quite a few people say that 5 seconds isn't quite as harsh as it probably should have been.
Yeah. I think kind of like the race stewards or whoever sets the penalties, they kind of dug themselves a little bit of a hole because like what's 5, what's 10, things like that. But
maybe that needs to be looked at then.
That I was literally about to say maybe that needs to be looked at because there are, like you said, there are like if Max Verstappen, let's just say it's Max and Sergio 1-2. And he, I don't know, someone's he unlaps someone. Actually, unlaps someone. He's lapping someone. Let's say it's
Ocon.
We're just going to give Ocon penalty. Okay, let's just say he unlaps someone. Actually, we're not going to say Ocon because that's a whole other thing. Let's just say Alex Albon, right?
Yes,
Alex Albon
sure.
unlaps himself, makes a little bit of a mistake or something. Let's just say he locks up, hits Albon. Albon has to pit. Give Max a 5-second penalty. First of all, that 5-second penalty means nothing to Max, right?
Yeah.
He'll make it up in no time. But that could mean Albon, who was running in 10th, which is a point, he has to go and pit, change the front wing or whatever, and he's out the points. That punishment is more for them than it is for Max. And maybe they need to, even post-race, have a look at perhaps where, again, this just opens up a can of worms. Look, he was 10th. Now he's at the back of the grid. I know we gave you a 5-second time penalty, but maybe another punishment is deemed. But again, that just opens up a can of worms.
Yeah, it does. It does beg the question.
It just gets very tactical.
Surely racing is racing. These incidents are bound to happen. Maybe we don't need to have any further intervention. It feels unfair at the time, but when the shoe's on the other foot, it also doesn't feel unfair. So I guess it depends. But it's not the first time that Hamilton has made contact this year. So
but you know what? I think maybe they don't get penalties, but you dock points.
Yeah, it could be that. So for example, I think he was running in 9th, let's say. So Piastri should have earned 2 points. Maybe because you removed Piastri from potential point scoring position, you deduct 3 championship points, regardless of what position that is. It could be first, it could be 3rd, it could be 10th, because then it's a teeny tiny thing, but it just maybe might make drivers, probably not, but maybe might make drivers in the moment think.
Well, I mean, if it's a super close fight, you know, between one or any position in the championship, you know, as we saw with 2021, with both Max and Lewis coming into the same. Coming in with the same number of points, it might make you think like, all right, let's just not do anything stupid here.
Or could it be that if you cause another driver to DNF, the punishment is a lot bigger?
No, again, this is where teams will be tactical because they
that's
can
the
just
thing.
retire a car And then, is it, you know, so,
because I'd like to remind you that Hamilton's attempted murder on Verstappen was only a 10-second time penalty.
the Silverstone incident.
Yep. Which feels wrong for the attempted murder, but there we go. But yeah, anyway, that's enough about penalties and all that boring stuff. Let's get into the really exciting stuff and talk about arguably the hero of the weekend, Mr. Williams himself. Albon. What a weekend for Williams. Unreal. Hats off to Albon. Absolutely brilliant. 6 points in the bag. Didn't put a foot wrong. He was trying to keep the McLaren at bay. Lando was getting a little bit frustrated behind him. Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
What can he do? That's what he's got to get those points. He's got to defend.
Yeah, he was like, if you'd have said Albon 7 and then only the Mercedes, the Red Bulls and the Ferraris ahead of him, like that sounds about right. Like that, like he shouldn't have beaten a Mercedes. He shouldn't have beaten a Ferrari. So he's done arguably a perfect weekend.
Well, he put it in P5 as well in qualifying. So
exactly.
To only go back 2 places with Mercedes, Ferraris, Red Bulls, McLarens, then, you know, hats off. And it's not just this race. He's been doing it the past few races, right? It's just a solid job of maximizing everything that he can from that car and where they are on the racetrack. So
I do think that it does make him look slightly better than he probably is, purely because Logan just is nowhere near the level that it needs to be. However, maybe that isn't the case. Maybe this car is still a bit rubbish, but Albon is just so good. I think time will tell maybe next year once Sargent's maybe either had a year in the car or they get somebody else in. But we'll have to wait and see. That's a whole nother can of worms that we won't go into. But it would be very interesting to see, because Albon is confirmed for next year in the Williams, correct? So I don't think that... Is he? No, I don't think he is. I don't think he is, actually. But let's say, for example, if Albon carries on at Williams, it would be very interesting to see what driver he's pitted against and how well he does against that driver.
I think also the track played into their strengths. So let's see how Singapore goes before we even look at it next year. And
I just mean, you know, Albon has how many points compared to Sargent?
He has... Sorry.
So
I'm trying to find out the driver market as well. But
so Albon, I can tell you, Albon currently has 21 points.
Yeah.
And I almost said Lawson. And Sargent has 0.
Yeah.
Sargent is technically currently the only full-time Grand Prix driver for the entire season not to score a point.
What about the 15 drivers at AlphaTauri?
Well, I mean, Lawson's not a permanent driver. He's brought in as a replacement. De Vries was a permanent driver, didn't score a point. Ricciardo is technically a permanent driver, but he's not racing there anymore because Lawson's there, and also he's only been racing for like 2 or 3 races, so I don't classify that either. He's the only permanent, we'll go with permanent, he's the only permanent driver who hasn't scored a point, which is it's not good, is it?
It's not good considering your teammate has 21.
Yeah,
if his teammate had 3 or 4,
3 or 4, sure,
the cars at the back
no problems with that whatsoever. That's completely justified. Got no issues with that. But I mean, let's say for example that he scored 5 points by now. Like a second driver for Williams has scored 5 points. All of a sudden, that 26 points. Like, it doesn't make that much of a difference in terms of that step up to Alpine or that step down to Haas, but maybe Haas do really well in the last part of the season because apparently they've got a B-spec car on the way, so maybe Haas overtake Williams in the standings. And then because Sargent wasn't performing, they get less prize money. Who knows? So it could be really, really important that Sargent starts picking up points. We just don't know. Do you want to talk about the Haas boys real quick? Because that sort of led us into Haas.
Not really.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's not really a lot to say. The only thing was...
I think the most interesting thing to come out is this B-spec car.
Yeah, apparently they have a B-spec car
which is very Red Bull inspired. So it'll be interesting to see how that helps them jump up. Whether, like you said, it's like, oh, right now they're getting past other teams in the constructors. So.
Yeah. Well, in the constructors, Haas currently have 11 points and Alfa Romeo have 10. So I think that the bare minimum is to confirm that 8th place. That is the bare minimum for them. But they will have their eyes set on 7th.
They'll probably have the eyes set on as high as possible. So.
Yeah, they're not going to catch Alpine. The gap is way too big. So Alpine have 73 points. Williams have 21. That's a huge gap. They're not closing that. I'd argue that Alpine and McLaren, they won't change their positions in the constructors whatsoever. McLaren will finish 5th, Alpine will finish 6th, unless something insane happens.
Well, I don't think Alpine are going to bring any updates to the level that McLaren have.
No.
So it's probably going to be quite set now, probably for the rest of the season.
Yes.
Probably see what Aston Martin will do with McLaren. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Now, obviously, they've also confirmed Nico and Kevin for next season as well. So that could be a little bit of pressure off their shoulders. To say, I'm not driving for my future. Got another season in Formula One, and that just might help draw out some better performances. But I think we're pretty much done with Monza. It was like a good start,
pretty good race.
But I think the middle was kind of boring.
It was pretty good compared to the rest of the season, let's say. I'm very biased, but I still think that Silverstone was a personal highlight for for the season because we had some interesting battles, and I'd argue that this was a close second in terms of the best race so far this season.
I'd probably put up with the Monaco and Zandvoort were my two interesting.
Monaco was okay. Zandvoort was also pretty good. So maybe joint second with the Zandvoort. We've had two pretty good races in the past couple of weeks. So, but hopefully, because we all look forward to that big twist, that big story of the season type thing, and maybe that comes at Singapore, and maybe it's because we've got a new race winner. Who knows?
That is literally, I think, the goal for anyone,
yeah.
Bar Red Bull is just like, right, new race winner. So, but yeah, I think what also helped was Ferrari. Just like, we've got a Monza spec car, we've got a fresh Monza engine. You know, they put up a little bit of a battle, and I think the bigwigs at F1 saw what happens when there's a fight for first.
Yeah,
is like it does make the sport a lot more engaging and interesting. And obviously, no one wants anyone to be punished for being dominant or anything like that. But
Not
I think
really, no.
there may be some changes coming just to see if they can peg Red Bull back and make the championship fight a lot more.
Dominicali has said that he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, they say that, but remember, like, numbers, don't lie. But liars run numbers. That was a very good quote I had.
Ooh, like that. That's good.
So he can say, I don't want that. But if he notices, maybe viewing figures are going down, engagement is going down because Red Bull and Max are dominating, I would not be surprised if a rule change does come in or something happens to just try and level out the pack.
I think between seasons, yes. Mid-season.
Oh no, never anything mid-season. No,
yeah. I was just gonna say.
Yeah. During the season, they were like, okay, we're gonna do X or Y or something like that. So,
but
yeah. Cool. Do we want to talk a little bit about some stuff? It's actually been a very quiet week. In the
I mean, we've been recording for 38 minutes. Should we quickly cover cost cap?
Well, there's nothing to cover. Everyone was
there. We go. That's it.
Everyone was in. Well, there was one thing that has come to light, which is apparently around Ferrari. They haven't named the team, but it's around Ferrari. So apparently, Ferrari or Italy as a country has tax breaks for people joining, high-skilled people joining, I think, in sports.
Yeah, sure.
So essentially, Ferrari can hire engineers at what would be a lower salary, but because their tax is reduced massively, or they don't pay tax at all, it ends up that they actually earn more if they were based in the UK. So apparently that's a loophole that they've been using, which is not really them, it's the country, to poach talent from other staff. Because look, let's just say, let's just say you get paid in £200,000 in the UK, but it's 50% tax, it's 100K. We'll pay you 150K in Italy, but you won't get taxed at all. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
or
a
you
little
get
bit of a
taxed at
no-brainer.
like 10% type thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's fair enough, and it could justify potentially even some teams moving some of their operations or spreading their operations across different places. I mean, like I know that the average wage in Switzerland is ridiculously high, and that's where Alfa Romeo are based.
Yep.
So, I mean, maybe they open up a factory in Italy because they work so closely with Ferrari, or
could, yeah.
maybe because they're being bought up by Audi that they transfer some of the production to somewhere in Germany. Who knows? I mean, there could be potentially bits and pieces that they find in terms of cost cap skipping, I guess.
But
But I did not know that.
Yeah, I think they need to have a good look at the cost cap because, like, while I'm all for engineers and top brass getting paid what they're worth, as Terry said, there's redundancies that they've had to make, and people can't get pay rises because of the cost cap. Like, maybe like graphic designers or machinists or whatever, and that's just not fair in the sport that generates so much money. They should look at maybe making sure that those people can essentially make more money and progress throughout. So I'm hoping that the cost cap is a continually evolving thing.
Yeah, because I think that one of the things which they could very easily do is just say that the cost cap stays at the same like rate of inflation.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that that's something that they've taken into account. So, for example, if inflation is at 5%, let's say, and it's, again, I'm going to do this for math's sake, but let's say the budget for the whole season is 100 million for the first season, and then suddenly the inflation goes up 5%. So the budget for the next season should be 105 million to account for inflation. So I think personally, at the very least, that should be something that they take into consideration.
And I think what they should demonstrate is that going into people's wages and things like that. So
especially if they justify it and they say like we will allow you to match inflation or worldwide inflation, providing that every single one of the employees also gets a cost of living wage or wage rise or something like that, because then not only do the employees get a little bit more money, but also the team gets a bit more money to deal with things that cost more. For example, maybe carbon fiber has gone up from, this shows how little I know about carbon fiber. It goes from, £100,000 per 3 meters of the material, which obviously then you mold and shape and stuff like that, to £120,000 for the 3 meters or whatever it is. So I think that's how the fabrication works. I don't know. But yeah, you get my point. So it would allow for different bits and pieces to come into play. But again, who knows? I am in no way a math man. So I have no idea.
It just goes back to just continually keep closing loopholes, looking at who's been affected by the cost cap, and see, okay, that's a little bit unfair on perhaps lower paid people or staff. Just keep evolving. Because if they don't change anything, I guarantee the teams will find even more ways around it. So, and then that just defeats the whole purpose. But yeah,
that's about it, I guess. There's not really that much else to discuss, right?
Well, do we want to? We were talking about drivers for next year. Do we want to talk about I don't want to say it's a predicament, but challenge that AlphaTauri have with Yuki, Daniel, and Liam Lawson?
We can do.
Liam, actually, we didn't even talk about him in the race, is doing really, really well, considering he just had to jump into that car, has had has a few weekends at the start of the season or anything like that, and he's doing bits, and the only person to overtake Max Verstappen.
Yep. One of the only people to overtake Max Verstappen this season.
He is making a name for himself, providing a justified reason why he should be in Formula One next season. And there's also, if we're talking, driver salaries aren't included, but a cheaper option than Daniel Ricciardo.
Much cheaper than Daniel Ricciardo. I think that there's no guarantee that Daniel has that seat at AlphaTauri for next season. No. And I think that realistically, unless another team comes in for Daniel Ricciardo and offers him a contract for next year, I think that Daniel will stay at AlphaTauri. and because obviously Checo's contract will be up at the end of next season as well. And Daniel Ricciardo will essentially be like trying to prove you are the person to sign for Red Bull to put in the car against Max and be a teammate of Max. I think that's probably what will happen. He's more commercial with Boss coming in as well. We haven't really talked about that, but Boss coming in as a sponsor for the AlphaTauri team as well. AlphaTauri Boss or Boss for Tauri or whatever they want to call it. That's something that will play heavily into it because Boss may turn around and say we will only sponsor the team if Daniel Ricciardo is the driver next year. You never know because Boss Daniel Ricciardo sells itself.
It does.
It does. Think about it. If there is a like Boss advert for suits or something like that, and you've got Daniel Ricciardo wearing Boss suits, that's just printable money. That is quite literally printable money. So I think that, or Liam Lawson in Boss, not as appealing, is it? So potentially they could come in with a demand. Sponsors have been known to do similar things, so we'll have to wait and see. And then it will probably be a straight shot between, is it Yuki? Because although is Yuki confirmed for next year? I don't know. But it could be a straight shot between, right, well, there's one seat at the big boy table, Yuki, Daniel, whoever comes out on top or whoever we think is the best one for the job, you'll be joining Max for 2025.
So,
you just don't
know. At this moment of time, so this article is on September 7th. It's set to expire at the end of this year. Yuki.
Okay, cool. So I think that the Yuki deal will probably be renewed. I think that's very, very likely. And then Yuki will probably transition over to Aston Martin once Honda comes through because he's a very heavily Honda-backed driver. So, and very, like we said before, very clearly, Yuki has what it takes to be a Formula One driver. Didn't look like that the first year. He was way too hot-headed, but I feel like a level of calm and
he's kind of had to become the team leader since Pierre left.
Yeah, he's grown up.
Yeah, and that responsibility has helped him massively, I think.
Yeah, so and I'm sure that Pierre would have given him some words of wisdom and stuff like that as well, like passing the torch, let's say.
Yeah, so... But yeah, it's actually been a quiet week in Formula One. I know Red Bull did something at the Nürburgring with Seb and DC
Very cool.
and a few of their other drivers. I don't really I don't want to talk about it and just give exposure to it, but Helmut's not exactly been saying the right things.
Let's skip through that because that's like, not that we don't want to support that or anything. It's just not a nice thing to talk about. We all know what we're talking about. He said some horrible things. We don't agree with them. Yeah. There we go.
So, but yeah, it'll be race week tomorrow. So I'm sure a little bit more news will come out. We'll record another episode previewing Singapore. And maybe this could be the race where Max Verstappen just gets his 11th win.
Yeah, it's going to be 11, isn't it? I'm crossing my fingers, but like me crossing my fingers, it's a 1-1.
It's a 1-1.
1-1.
I wonder what he'll do, like to celebrate. Do you reckon it'll be just like the two middle fingers?
Yeah, that would be hilarious. That would be so good.
Yeah.
That would be really, really good.
So, it's been. Yeah, it's just been a quiet week. I think.
Well then let's wrap it up there because I think that there's not too much else to say, other than you have now, if you're still listening to this, and it's not me listening to the recording to just make sure that I haven't said anything completely stupid before I publish it. You've been listening to this podcast now for 48 minutes and 34 seconds. So I mean, reward yourself by rating us because we haven't asked for ratings in a while. It's something super important. We probably should have done that at the beginning of the episode, let's be honest. But maybe we should do that next. Should we do that next week? We kick off with like, please remember to like, subscribe, just give us a rating, that sort of stuff.
No.
No? Okay, cool. But yeah, so if you made it this far, please be able to rate us and follow the pod as well, because it does mean a lot and it definitely does help us in the charts and stuff like that. So much appreciated. But I think that's enough from us, really.
Plus, we would also like to do an episode with viewer questions.
Yes. Really nice. Yeah, I did see we had one on Spotify, but it was super specific to that episode. It's not something that we could potentially cover over this. But we could definitely, I still have some F1 hot takes that we need to cover at some point as well. I put up a poll on our Instagram. Go and follow it. Shameless plug. But yeah, so we can definitely do some more interaction with you guys, and do some more content.
Do you know how we know it's been a quiet F1 week? We've been struggling for memes.
Yeah, it's been almost no memes, is there? So
yeah, usually we're like, we could meme that, we could meme that. So.
I did think about potentially putting out a meme about helmet, but it's just a very touchy subject, and it's just easier to just leave it alone.
I did a little thing just to show just how ridiculous it was,
mate. But, honestly, get in the bin at this point. I understand he's from a different generation, and etc. But that doesn't make it okay whatsoever.
No, that's a bullshit excuse because you're learning all the time. Is just ridiculous kind of thing.
Yeah, true.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
awesome.
Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Yep. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time with our preview for Singapore.
See you in Singapore, I guess. Yeah. See you then. Cheers, everyone.